Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Imagine That. We are your armchair Imagineers for Walt's Apartment Productions, and we are so excited that you've joined us today because we have a really special episode today. Super excited, kicking off 2025. But before we get started, we want to thank our amazing sponsors, Sunken City Design, Getaway Today, and We're in the Park. And big shout out to our lamplighters, our Patreons, who are keeping the conversation over on our Discord going on strong, which, if you have not yet joined, totally should. Scroll down to the show notes. It's free. Just click on, join the Discord and come have a conversation with us. We have a bunch of different channels going on, all different conversations about Star Wars and Marvel and all things Disney. So if you haven't joined already, click the link in the show notes to check it out. But I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one here. We also have the whole Imagine That team today. So let's go around the room. Sam, how's it going?
It's going. It's great. Really excited for tonight. So glad to be here.
I'm glad that you're here too. It's going to be a fun one. Lou, how are you doing?
Again, excited to be here. It's gonna be a solid one.
Yes, absolutely. And rounding out the team, Kevin, how's it going?
I am also very excited to be here. I'm very ready for this conversation.
And that's because we have former Disney Imagineer Matt McKim on the show tonight. And we are so excited. Matt was a sculptor, a dimensional designer, and production designer, among many other roles. And he's also the son of Disney Imagineering legend Sam McKim. So we're really looking forward to chatting about both of their careers tonight. So, Matt, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. Happy to be here. Great team of people to be talking to.
Oh, thanks. So let's dive into it. So Disney fans will know of Sam McKim for his drawings, especially like the maps of Disneyland, pre-show artwork for like great moments with Mr. Lincoln, and so much more. And some might even know him as a child actor before his career at Disney. But Matt, we want to kick things off and hear from your own words. How would you describe Sam McKim?
Ooh, how would how would I describe my dad? Dad.
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's funny. Something just popped in my head, and I remember um, I'm taking care of my mom right now, who's 97 and a half right now, and so I'm in the house I grew up in. And prior to this house in Shadow Hills, my parents were in the city of Van Nuys in a little house. And that's actually where he did the map. The first Disneyland map was in that house. But my dad told a story, which was kind of funny, that one Saturday morning, he's in his bathrobe and the doorbell rings. And this is before my brother was born. My brother was born in 1957. So don't know exactly what year, but between 54 and 57, doorbell rings. Dad goes and answers the door, and here's these kids, neighborhood kids, standing at the door. And one of them points up to my dad and says, "And this is Mr. McKim, and he works for Walt Disney." And all these kids were like wide-eyed and everything. And my dad said, "I never really thought about that." He said, Walt Disney was so big, especially in the 50s, right? That it was almost, my dad said, I almost felt like an astronaut, even though this was the 50s, but my dad said, I never thought about it. So in that same light, dad was dad. He worked at WED, he worked for Walt Disney and everything. I got all that. And, I grew up with it. And I joke the fact that it's not true, but I joked the fact that I was 14 when I finally got my first non-Disney t-shirt. All the freebies that the Imagineers and Disney employees would get, they bring home to their kids and stuff. So I grew up with it. How do I describe my dad? Well, and because he did have a career before he came to Disney as an actor. He was 11 years old when he started acting in the golden era of Hollywood, 1935. And it's interesting. We never really said Dad, the movie star or the Western star. But when I'm reading all of these articles and everything, they're calling him a star, and it's interesting to think of that. And that was a part of his life that he really didn't talk about so much. My mom would kind of stop us and say, "Hey, it's late night or whatever. Do you want to see Dad on the TV in an old movie?" And it was kind of strange. And you're hearing your dad as a kid, seeing your dad moving as a kid and everything. So I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but it's an interesting question that I've never been asked to describe my dad. So he packed a lot into his life, acting from 1935 to 1953. He was in 2 wars, World War II and then the Korean War. And he went to 2 art schools under the GI Bill. Art Center, and he and his brother, who was a photographer, got the first 11 degrees from Art Center. So they were there at the start of Art Center when it started in LA. And the day after he graduated, he was pulled as a reservist and was in the Korean War, the day after he graduated, and came back and then went to Chenard Art Institute and got another bachelor's degree under the GI Bill. So, okay. So I'm sorry, I'm giving you my dad's life here, but it's like, okay, how do I describe him? Okay. So Dad, the actor, Dad, the army man, Dad, the art student, Dad working in the art department at 20th Century Fox, to Dad working for Walt Disney and the Walt Disney Company. I took a lot of his talent for granted. And so when I would be doing a show for the neighborhood kids or whatever, Dad would be building stuff for me, designing and building stuff and painting stuff for me, bouncing things off of him and stuff like that. So, and I never thought I'm asking an Imagineer to help me, design and build this stuff. I didn't think of that, because it was Dad. I had things in my bedroom that, were rejects from Imagineering or whatever. And I grew up with it, and it was cool stuff, and the neighborhood kids thought it was cool, but it wasn't that big of a deal to me.
What kind of stuff?
Well, there were, fake bones that were stuff working for, the pirate games and things like that. There was a skeleton hand with a candle in it. That was for one of the games. They had cast Don Iwerk's hands for Abraham Lincoln, and the thumb was off a little bit. So they threw him in the trash. Well, my dad took it out of the trash and he brought him home because he thought, oh, my son Matt would really get a kick out of this. So I have Lincoln's hands, not the mechanical, it's the silicone hands. But I have an eyeball that, was in a bunch of stuff, fake fur and blah, blah, blah. And it looks used. So was it out of Pirates of the Caribbean? I have no clue, but it was cool stuff that, I was just as curious as my dad was about things. And so I guess I was being groomed to be an Imagineer, and with my curiosity that set me up for the job. Yeah.
I have a
So
quick question
yeah.
for that stuff. You mentioned like the eyeball where you don't know like what it was used for. Did your dad
Yes.
explain to you before he gave you like those hands, the whole story of these are Lincoln's hands, actually Don Iwerk's hands, or did you learn that later? Did he just present them as here are fun hands for you to use?
Yeah, he did describe. My dad was very thorough, and that's something I should. And I'll get back to this in a second, Kevin. I'm sorry. My dad was known for details, and he would borrow stacks and stacks of books from the library, and they would constantly be calling him and saying, "Sam, are you done with those books? Can we have them back?" Oh yeah. I got to get back to you. So anyways, my dad would describe things in detail, and that's who he was. So he did describe these were Lincoln's hands. The thumb was in the wrong position. So that's why these were thrown away. Now, I didn't know they were Don Iwerk's hands until I was with Don and he mentioned it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Don, I have your hands at home, you know? So, and actually I keep telling myself the next time I'm going to see him, I've got to bring him to him so he can sign the inside of it for me, you know? But yeah, the eyeball, I don't think my dad even knew. So he couldn't give me background on that. But, you know, I was always building stuff. So I would get pieces of fake fur, you know, and out of deduction and the time period, the way that it was cut. Now, this is fur. Think about this for a second. This is a very Imagineering thing to do. It's fake fur, but they were cutting out feather designs, right? So this was from America Sings. And it was a scrap that, you know, came from America Sings. They, you know, were making Uncle Sam or whatever it was at that time. And this was a discard. So I put 2 and 2 together myself and figured that out. But so not everything was described, you know, some of it I'd have to kind of figure it out or ask. Yeah.
That is, I can't even imagine. Just like, okay, so when you got that the fur and the like, how old were you?
I would have been about 6 to 8 years old, something like that. 8 years old, maybe. Well, yeah, maybe a little bit later because that's 75 to 76. I was born in 64. So maybe I was about 11 or 12 then by that time. Yeah.
Wow. So I mean, I could just imagine, I think all of us here kind of like, being our 10, 11-year-old selves and having this piece of essentially Disney trash, this discarded things. But I mean, now we have all of this for all time, right? Like these pieces are now being preserved in your own little mini archive. And
Well,
that
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I hate to tell you this. It's in a box up in my garage. That
It's
fake
still
fur
in the
stuff.
box.
Yeah, it's just in a box up in the garage.
It's not
Yeah.
in the landfill though,
It's not
so
in the
That's right.
landfill. And
it's still preserved.
yes. And as you, Kevin, and Amanda had seen part of the stuff that we've been finding and saving and trying to get it organized, there's so much stuff that my dad saved. He saved everything, which is a curse and it's a blessing. So the things that we have found, of course, you know, some of it we had to use our own deductions with my dad not being around anymore. So I could show you a piece right now if you want. So
Absolutely.
we're opening up these boxes, and I didn't tell you the whole story. So when my dad retired after over 32 years, he had like 32 boxes, one for every year that he worked for the company. And I helped him pack it up, some of this stuff. And they came to the house, and I don't think my dad opened them at all after coming home. I really don't think he did. And so after my dad's passing, so he retired in 87. He passed away in 2004. And I think it was about 30 years or so, 30, 35 years. And I turned to my brother and I said, you know, Brian, we've got to go through these boxes. We have got to go through these boxes. We don't know if it's trash or treasures. And so as we were opening these boxes, there was stuff that we just needed to throw away, but so many things that just blew us away. And so let me show you one thing. It was a 1950s box. I mean, not that the box was from the 1950s, but the stuff in it mostly was from the 1950s.
And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, you're going to be able to see the video. So you can go check that out if you're listening on audio and you want to watch on video.
So my dad started the end of 54 at Imagineering, and that was at the studio. So the Glendale facility was not there yet. So anyways, I found these 1/4 inch size elevations of Main Street. And you can see all of my dad's notes on here. And I was thinking, okay, my dad worked on the windows on Main Street, you know, placement, style, names, and that sort of thing. And he worked on architectural ornamentations. And this had a lot of notes about color and the like. And I was thinking, he didn't have anything to do with paint. So I don't get that. Well, on the back of these sheets are a lot of sketches. And I noticed this one, which had the entry to Tomorrowland. And it's kind of a bird's eye view. And I thought, why is that on the back of these Main Street drawings? Well, I then realized that this was next to a bunch of artwork and research photographs and the like for the map, the Disneyland map. So all of a sudden I realized these set of drawings my dad had under his arm when he went down to Disneyland to start researching for the map. And these were all of his notes of colors and, you know, what this design is and everything else. And I thought, holy smokes, this is kind of cool. I figured out, and now it has a story. You know, this is what my dad went down to Disneyland with under his arm. And then in another box, so everything was not necessarily all in one area. But speaking of maps, and what I love is finding original pieces, original things that my dad actually did, right? So I found, for those that are collectors, this is going to kill you. My dad cut a piece of the map, one of his maps, here, and there was a reason why he did that. So the original map that he did was for the 1958, right? There's 3 different versions of that, and my dad did, and I have to use a cheater here. Sorry, and I actually have it on my phone, so I could bring it around with me. So there's a 1958A, there's a 1958B. So the A has an orange border, B has an orange border, C has an orange border, but the view liner in Tomorrowland and the Jungle Cruise water is green for 58A. 58B, it has no Cascade Peak. Jungle Cruise water is blue. And the 58C has an orange border, Cascade Peak added, Jungle Cruise water is blue. So he also did 61, 62, and 64 had an A and a B, and the borders changed for that. So I tell you this because the original map that my dad did, every time they did an upgrade, like for the peak and such, my dad would do the artwork. They would literally paste it onto the original artwork, send it out to the printer, and it would come back then. And after 1964, the original map, we think, never came back from the printers. So WDI does not know where the original artwork that my dad did in 1958 and all those additions up to 64 is. So it could be in someone's garage. It could be in the landfill. Nobody knows where it's at.
What?
So
Sounds
anyway,
like a plot for a movie.
there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. So anyways, so this little piece then that my dad had cut out, I found an original tissue paper with the carbon
Wow.
on the back that my dad did for one of the additions on the map. So this is the original sketch that my dad did, and then he would copy it, and then he would, do pen and ink on top of that, and then the color would be added for the printers. But it was kind of neat to kind of find these pieces. It's like, wow, it kind of puts all the pieces of the map, so to speak, together. And I need to re-find this item, but sorry, we found the original pink slip that my dad got paid for doing the original 1958 map. And you'd be surprised on how much he was paid. So this is 1958, and it was $350, which is a chunk of change for the 50s. But for the amount of effort that he put into it, it wasn't enough, really. And my dad talks about the guy who was in charge of the map financially. And my dad had done the work, and he said, for everything that I've put into this, he says it's about $700 what I've got into this right now. And this guy kind of bites his lip and he says, Sam, that's a little more than our budget. He says, how does 350 sound? And my dad goes, oh, okay. And in his mind, he goes, oh my gosh, I just accepted half of what I just told him it was worth, what I've got into it. So my dad got paid $350 for that. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
That is crazy. You should have gotten residuals off of it.
Well,
Yeah.
Every map, right? Give him a penny.
That doesn't work. It was never done that way. Yeah.
Imagine if it was.
Yeah, that would be kind of nice.
But that is just so incredible. What a great find. And like you said, every box is either trash or treasure, but for us, like Disney fans, like just that little piece of paper, we're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's incredible. I can't even imagine, like each piece that you pick up out of the box is just invaluable. Even if
Well,
it seems like trash, it was put in the box for a reason.
and
So,
we've got to put the pieces together and figure out why that piece is there too, and some of it doesn't make sense, but we've got a couple other people that are helping with this stuff. Jason Schultz, who works for the Nixon Library, is helping us with Christine McKay, I think is how you pronounce her last name, and she works at the museum also. They're helping us on their own time to do this, and then I call or send things to Tom Morris all the time too. So, and he loves coming over to the studio, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, can I take a picture of this? Can I take a picture of this?" So, yeah.
That's awesome. Well,
We talked to Tom
have
over at the event for your father, and he was talking about his how he was trying to preserve the history of Imagineering. So
Yes,
we're gonna
and
help him with that for sure.
he is amazing at, and I worked with him, years ago on EDL on Euro Disneyland Paris, and it's just kind of funny how I don't think of Tom that way, of being this wealth of information. Not that he's not a smart guy. He's always been a smart and talented guy, but it's like, holy smokes, he gets down into the weeds now, He brings up names that I've never heard of, not that I have to know everybody, but it's like, wow, who was that? What did they do? I never heard about that person, So you'll have to have Tom on your show.
that would be amazing.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think too, like having a group of people who are so fascinated by this, but can also help collaborate and put those pieces together. So it's not all on you to do, and you and your family to do. That it's a group effort. And like you said, you've only gone through some of the boxes. There's still
Right.
so many things to go through. So in going to the Centennial celebration in Santa Ana this last October, we were so honored to be invited to that and to go. And so the Lincoln hands that you were talking about,
Yeah, they were there.
we saw those and we're like, wait a minute, there's an arm. What is happening with this hand right here? But to hear the backstory and to just see everybody in that room absolutely adored your father.
Oh,
and to hear the stories of even secondhand, even if they never met him, they know somebody who did, and they just spoke nothing but highly of him and the legacy that he's passed on, and how grateful they were that you and your family put this event together to honor him like that. So thank you so much for doing
thank you.
that. And
We were
I
touched.
cannot wait to see what else you find in the other boxes and to have another event like that.
Well, I'll have to tell you. So, my brother Brian, and he was an animator for many years. His wife, my sister-in-law, is still there, and my nephew is. But Brian took a couple of boxes, and he was going through them, or is going through them right now at his house. And he just said, so what we think is going to be personal items, so it's like, Matt, I'm finding, preschool and kindergarten, elementary school artwork of yours and everything. It's like, oh, okay, that'll be interesting to look at. And he says, but I also found 3 very large. They seem to be original. He hasn't photographed it yet for me, and he hasn't given me the actual size. 3 seem to be original Mary Poppins posters. And these are like the size of your sliding glass door. He says they're like 45 by 75 or whatever. And so again, I don't have too many details on it. And I haven't, he's going to photograph it and send me before we get together. But yesterday I started thinking about this, and I thought, okay, Walt had requested him to work on Mary Poppins, but someone said to Walt, oh, Sam's busy working on something else. And my dad found out about this afterwards, and he says, I want you to go back to Walt and say that you said I was too busy and couldn't work on it. Because Walt knew about everything that was going on, everything that everyone was working on. And if he says, I want so-and-so to work on something, that means whatever you're working on, put it on hold and come work on this. He knew what was going on. So anyways, it kind of upset my dad that he didn't work on Mary Poppins. But I did find a little sketch pad of paper that was clipped together, and it had a note on it to be given to Emil Curry. And if you know who he is, he's an Academy Award winner for set design and such. I want to say MGM, but I could be wrong. And Emil came over to Disney, and he was a big part of Disneyland. I mean, you'll see his name everywhere, things that he did working on Main Street and everywhere else. But very talented man. Anyways, these are original little sketches that my dad did, and it was for the premiere of Mary Poppins at Grauman's Chinese Theater. And it's kind of amazing. I need to now go back and look at what it actually looked like for the opening, and then compare it to what my dad sketched out to see if any of that stuff actually came to fruition. But here's this little note, for email, from my dad on what these things were. So I started thinking about these posters. And after my dad's death, I found out from an old colleague of mine, Imagineer, that he was talking to my dad and had mentioned that my dad had done some posters for Disneyland, early Disneyland posters. I didn't know that. My brother never heard any of the stories. And he did the Alice in Wonderland poster and one of the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea posters. And it was in a different style, but Bjorn's style, because Bjorn had left to go home, and Walt wanted that style to continue. So my dad did it in that style. But anyways, so I started thinking about these posters, and I wonder, did my dad design these Mary Poppins posters that we have? Why would my dad have them? He didn't work on the picture. So I've got to do some research. I also found some sketches of the Mapo logo of Mary Poppins. And I don't know. I've got to do research and talk to WDI. I don't know if my dad did the logo for Mapo. But why did my dad have original sketches of it? I mean, it could be he was working on something else that I don't know. But anyways, there's some unanswered questions that I've got to dig into and find out.
Absolutely. Well, there's a lot of questions that will come up, especially as you continue to dig and find those new things. But that is fascinating that all of the movie posters and things that we've seen throughout the years, he could have designed them all.
Oh, you mean the Mary Poppins ones?
Yeah, like the Alice in Wonderland ones
Oh,
and
those are the only two that he did
oh,
for Disneyland. Right.
Awesome.
gotcha.
Yeah.
But still,
They're
that's awesome.
iconic
And
ones. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
that's
But
really cool.
but my point is, he never talked about it. At least I
Mhm.
don't remember a conversation with my dad, and my brother doesn't either. So there are definite. And how could you know? I forget things, and I had 25 years at Imagineering. You forget about the stuff, some of it, and you go, oh yeah, I did work on that. You don't
So probably check in on how iconic your work has become. You just move on to the next project because that's your job, that's your career.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, and I because I had a lot of field experience, I would be sent to the field a lot. So, it's exciting when you get to be a part of the design part of it, and then you go into production, and then you go to installation. And but I had been pulled to help out with theme lighting. And this is after I had come back to Imagineering, and I was working on Buena Vista Street and Cars Land, and I was helping out with theme lighting. So I ended up helping to install. I didn't have anything to do with the design, but I was helping with the installation of all of that. And when that was all done, they were hot and heavy in Florida, working on the new Fantasyland with you mentioned 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. They got rid of 20K and put in Mermaid and the Mine Coaster. It just went blank.
Seven Dwarfs Mine Train.
Seven Dwarfs. Thank you. So, anyways, it was basically like a half a land. It was a big project, and literally days after I finished installing the last light, I was on a plane to Florida to start helping with the installation. And it was a little embarrassing because I didn't really know anything about this project. And so I land and I'm getting this tour around, and all these people are coming up and going, oh my gosh, we're so glad you're here, Matt. I've got so many questions. What about that? And I said, you know what? I am so sorry. I am going to be going home tonight and looking at all the drawings because I have never even seen a drawing. All I know is there's a restaurant and there's a ride and there's a ride and there's a shop, and I don't know anything more than that, So I just, you have to throw yourself in sometimes from one project to another. And sometimes you have no time in between. Even with Shanghai, I was helping with some design, but production and then installation. And my boss said, hey, we're going to relocate you, Matt, to Shanghai. Okay. And I said, no. I said, I have relocated enough. I was in France for 2 years. I did Tokyo. I did Florida, a ton of Florida and everything. And I said, you know what? I'm done. I'm done with that. And so she said, well, how do you feel about taking business trips? And I said, I will do that. I will take business trips to Shanghai. Not a problem. And so I had a Florida portfolio on top of my Shanghai portfolio. Because if I wasn't going to be in Shanghai 100%, what are you going to do? So I would literally fly to Shanghai for 3-4 weeks, turn around, come back. I'd be home for a few days. I'd fly to Florida for a few weeks, 2-3 weeks. Then I'd fly home for a few days, and then I'd fly to Shanghai. And I was doing this for like 1.5 years, 2 years maybe. But life as an Imagineer is not all wine and roses.
Speaking of flying to Shanghai,
Yes.
if
Have you
you
been?
want it, I have not, but we do have a sponsor that will help you plan any of your Disney park vacations.
There
So
you go.
we're going to take a second and hear from Getaway today, and then we come back. We're going to hear more about Matt's experiences as an Imagineer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Let's Get to Know Our Sponsor. Getaway Today has been helping Disney vacation dreams come true since 1990. Whether you choose to visit the happiest place on earth or travel to Orlando for the most epic adventure, they want to help. Need to know the best hotel in the area? What theme park ticket should you use? Have a last-minute change? No worries. Their travel experts are always here to help. Want to book a cruise and don't know where to start? Hey, they can help with that too. They will help you find the perfect cruise for your vacation, whether it's your first time or you're a well-seasoned cruiser. When you book your cruise with one of Getaway Today's experts, you will have a dedicated agent to help every step of the way and take care of all the details so you can just focus on the fun. Getaway Today offers peace of mind travel, allowing you to cancel or make changes up to 72 hours in advance. You will always have the most up-to-date vacation information both pre-arrival and upon welcome. Getaway Today will guarantee the best prices with no hidden fees, and every time you book with Getaway Today, they will donate a portion back to a charitable organization in your area. And so far, over $4.5 million has been donated. So just click the link in our show notes to start your Disney, Universal, or cruise vacation planning for more information and the best deal. Or you can dial 855-GETAWAY and be sure to tell them Walt's Apartment sent you. And until next time, we hope you enjoy the view from Walt's Apartment.
Definitely check out Getaway Today for all of your vacation needs. Let them know that Walt's Apartment sent you. But we're here to continue our conversation with Matt. So, Matt, we talked a little bit before we hit record tonight about what it's like being a second generation Imagineer. Do you want to tell us how it's, maybe the benefits or the challenges of being a second generation Imagineer and how your dad's influence might have inspired you other than what you've told us already?
Yeah, well, I would go to Imagineering to wed, to have lunch with Dad sometimes, or he would actually ask me to come, and he wanted to get an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old's opinion on something, and so I remember going for lunch one time, and so Imagineering, there's some warehouse areas there, and there's black duvetine areas, so black curtains that will separate these areas. And I remember walking into one of these duvetined areas, and when the park opened, my dad had worked on shooting galleries, and they shot real lead pellets at that time. And so these things would actually ricochet sometimes, and they'd hit guests. So it was like, okay, now we're getting into the late 60s and the early 70s, new technology. There was infrared. And so my dad was working with this infrared stuff. And so there was a rifle set up, and then there was the shooting gallery. And so anyways, he gets me up there. I'm standing, and I'm just shooting away. Bam, 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 bam. And an older gentleman walked up behind me, and he kind of got down behind me, and he says, Matthew, he says, if you line up these points on the rifle, you're going to get better shots. Line them up with the targets. And I didn't stop. I just kept shooting. Bam, 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 bam. And I said, that's okay. I'm not paying for it. And I just kept going because, Dad, can I have another dime? Can I have another quarter or whatever, to put in here? I didn't have to, right? So it didn't matter what my score was, right? I was just shooting away, having a good time. And so he chuckled and chatted with my dad, and he left. And my dad walked up to me, and he says, thanks, Matt. He says, that's one of our vice presidents here. And it was John Hench. And probably about 25 years later, John brought up that story. So he remembered. I was surprised and embarrassed. But Yeah, that was
How
kind of
old were
funny.
you at the point?
Oh gosh, I was probably, this is early 70s, so I was probably 8 years old, something like that.
So forgivably. So you weren't like a
Yeah,
teenager. That's
yeah,
fine.
yeah. And there's another funny story that embarrassing dad. We were at Disneyland one day, and my brother and I were kind of near the train station steps, and it's the end of the night. It's dark, right? And my brother's 6 years older than me, so he's born in 57. I'm 64, and 1964, not 64 yet. And but when I would come into the park, I would love to go into the magic shop, and if I saved my money, I would get a mask, and so I had kind of a collection of masks. But if you remember those, but I would sometimes get a magic trick, or I would sometimes get a gag. Well, this day, I bought a gag, and the gag was those wind up hand buzzers. So it had a little button, and it'll ring that you put on the finger, and then when you shake someone's hand, it would rattle around and buzz them, right?
Believe it or not, my daughter still tries to use those on me.
Really?
She's eight, and yes, she
There you
gets
go.
them at like arcades and stuff and tries to use them on me. And
Well,
man.
Sam, you've got to tell her this story, because I was about her age, right? And so I noticed that my dad was talking to a gentleman over there in front. They were over by the Emporium. And so my dad waves both of us over, and he says, "Come over here, boys. I have someone I want to introduce you to." And so so he introduces us. And of course, I had the hand buzzer, and it was wound up and ready to go. Put my hand out, and I buzzed this guy, and he jumped back, shocked at first. And then he started laughing, and he thought it was funny. And so he leaves, and my dad says, "Thanks a lot, Matt." He says, I got to watch. Your brother, he behaves. He says, that was the president of Disneyland. It was Dick Nunes. And that was the first time I met Dick. I hand buzzed him. And, I had seen him and talked with him many times thereafter, but I would always forget to ask, "Do you remember the first time we met that I hand buzzed you?" And I never got a chance to ask him.
Oh,
Sounds like a good first impression, honestly.
Yeah.
Really, like their attitude towards you as a kid, just that's what Walt wanted, Like
Oh,
he
yeah.
wanted kids to just be able to be kids with their families, and everybody to just enjoy themselves. And other Imagineers that I've talked to have said, like, you have to kind of have that, like, hold on to that childlike sense of joy, that spark of childhood, even as an adult, when you're creating work, because you're looking at things and creating things for children and their parents. You have to be able to look through both lenses. So
absolutely,
I think they had their childlike sense about it too.
Oh yeah. And I have to tell you too, I have 5 favorite Imagineers. I was noticing your list of favorite Imagineers, and I had my 5 favorite growing up. And
we call that our Mount Rushmore. We ask for our Imagineering Mount Rushmore. So if you want to give us your 5, we are happy to listen.
Okay, I'm going to tell you. But the important part goes back to what we were just talking about, is these 5 Imagineers didn't talk down to me. They talked to me, as like another child. And they were really interested in who I was and what I was doing and what interests me and everything else. And so these 5 favorite are Harriet Burns, Leota Toombs, Alice Davis, Herb Ryman, and George McGinnis. And George, you might not have heard too much about him. He was actually the last one to be hired by Walt himself for Imagineering. And he did a lot of the ride vehicle designs. So where a Bob Gurr was much more technical, he was more artistic in the sense of designing the outsides and things. In fact, they worked together through the years too. And George has since passed. All of those are passed.
3 of your 5 were women in Imagineering.
Yes.
Do you think that the fact that they connected with you was because of they had that like nurturing aspect?
I don't know. You know what's interesting, and if 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 you were to ask them about what it was like to be working in a man's world at that time in the 50s and 60s, especially, um, this was a different place. Walt appreciated people for who they were and what they did. And I really believe, and I never met the man, I only know him through my father, but um, from many stories that I've heard firsthand, secondhand, and read, um, Walt didn't care what you looked like, what the color of your skin was, or if you were a man or a woman. And there have been many things that have been said, but when you really talk to the people that knew him, they'll tell you it didn't matter that I was a woman or that I was black or that I was, whatever. So, gosh, I don't know.
I'm just wondering if their ability to connect with you as a child is different. So I'm looking at myself. I told you before we started that I'm a kindergarten teacher, and so like I have that like childlike mentality with kids, and I try to connect with them on that level. So it was just me wondering if it was like, hey, the women were more nurturing and were perceptive to your needs as a child.
Mark and Alice Davis did not have children. And my dad actually knew Alice going to Chouinard Art Institute. So they knew each other before even Disney. But I mean, there was nurturing with it, I guess, in many ways. But I think they were just a typical Imagineer that was just so curious, and was broad-minded in the sense of reality and taking it all in, and not getting enough of it. I'll have to tell you an interesting story of how I met one of them for the first time. Just down the street from Imagineering on Flower Street, and the park is still there. It's changed, but my dad had my mom make a picnic lunch for us, and the three of us had a picnic down the street one morning or one afternoon. And so I'm on the swing set, and again, I was like 7 or 8, I think, somewhere around there. And I see my dad speaking to a lady, and he calls me over and he says, "Matt, I want you to meet a good friend of mine. I work with Leota just down the street here at Imagineering." And he says, "I'd like you to meet my good friend Leota. And she is the head in the crystal ball in the Haunted Mansion." So I'm actually shaking her hand and saying, "It's nice to meet you," and everything. And I'm looking at her. And so after she leaves, I turned to my dad and I said, "Okay, Dad, who was that lady?" And he goes, "What are you talking about? That's Leota Toombs." I go, "Okay, that's Leota Toombs, but she's not the lady in the crystal ball in the Haunted Mansion." And he goes, "Yes, she is. Why would you say that?" And I said, "Because that lady has black hair and the lady in the crystal ball has white hair." It was a 7-year-old's perception.
Yeah.
So my
Everything
dad
is
had to
very
go through
literal.
and explain everything to me. But that was the first time I met Leota.
Oh,
and
that's a funny story.
What a sweetheart of a lady. Just sweetheart. Yeah.
Well, that's a great story. And it seems like you had a really good sense of attention to detail also.
Yeah.
Because like what 7-year-old would pick that up of, like really analyze a face and be like, "No, that's not her. The lady I know in the crystal ball does not have that hair."
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say her voice was different.
Well, it wasn't
is.
her voice, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and I could have put that together too and thought, wait a second, this isn't that lady, so. But I remember my dad, being on the ride and going up the ramp at the end. And I remember my dad pointing out Leota, the little miniature Leota, "Hurry back. Don't forget your death certificate." My dad was saying that was actually a test, that they were playing around with projections on miniatures and such. And they liked it so much that they used it. So that was just a playful test. It was probably Yale Gracie that did that.
They say that is her voice, right?
That is her voice. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
you out there to see the new store,
I'm sorry.
the new Leota store at the end of the exit for Haunted Mansion. They put in the new kind of an oversized building for a shop for the location, but the shop itself is really pretty inside. And it
Yeah.
has a nice painting of Leota tombs in there.
Oh, good. I've only seen the outside. I haven't seen the inside. And I've got some opinions on that, but I'm going to keep my mouth
We all
shut.
You can tell us after we hit end recording.
Okay. I'll tell you something that was kind of interesting. And this is as a production designer. I hope I'm not going to get somebody upset with me here, but if you go to the exit, okay, you don't even have to go on the attraction. If you go to the exit and you're coming out of the tomb of Mansion, that's the exit, right? If you're talking about your experience to people and such, so you're not really looking where you're going, there's a big 4x4 or 6x6 post that you're going to smack right into. So when you come out of an exit, especially a tight exit, you're going to automatically fan out once things open up. And there is one of these posts like 10 feet outside of that exit. As a production designer, that wouldn't work. So anyways, I maybe they didn't make a model of it. Maybe they didn't do a digital model. I don't know. But I have a feeling that's going to be a big head knocker or a tripper.
Seems like some steps are being cut these days on occasion.
I don't know. I'm not there, and I haven't been there since 2020, and so I'm not exactly sure.
It's okay. We talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
We can say it. We can say it because we've got no connections, and our views are our own. So
well, and Imagineers being retired or gone or whatever the case may be, we always critique things. We can't go to a theme park without critiquing things. So
we can't either.
No,
we're not even in Imagineering.
I like the queue line.
That's why this show exists.
Yeah. There you go. I like the queue line though. I haven't walked through it, but I've seen it from the outside, and I like it.
Yeah,
it's great. I think they put a lot of great work into it. Little details.
It definitely ties in the story from the outside or from the inside out. And you really get to, if you're looking at the details, you learn more about the characters that are in the mansion. And if you aren't paying attention to the details, it just builds the ambiance. So it really is a win-win for everybody. But if you're like us and you want to know the backstory and you want to know the details and why things were put there, then it's right up your alley. So those are the times where we're excited to see a long line, because then we can really take our time and go through each element of the line. So
yes.
But speaking of details, let's take a break and hear from another one of our sponsors that's all about details in theme parks. We are back.
I hit the wrong ad break. Sorry.
Hey fam, what scavenger hunt are you doing?
Well, we are doing Where in the Park.
Do you guys know Where in the Park? Because we do.
We do. So how you play this is that they give you a deck of cards with an image on it, and you get to look around and see where in the park that is.
And they're fun. So if you like to find stuff, this is what you need to do.
The amazing game. We're in the park right here.
If you're a seasoned Disney park goers, as we are, it's a fun, challenging even for the hardcore Disney parks fan.
We have played the Where in the Park games that we felt like, we got
still a challenge.
Oh no, yeah, still a challenge, a fun challenge though, not an impossible challenge.
They get really close to details, and you're like, I have never even seen that. I don't even know.
Where in the park have I seen that?
The great thing about these is that they're not in attractions and they're out in the open places. It's meant for families to play.
Besides people who've been there a lot, it's fun for people that are new to the parks as well, because you catch some of those details that you would probably miss when you're first going.
So there's images that you are finding
on one side of the card, and then the other has the hint and the answer that you can reveal if you choose to.
Before it was just the hint and the answer, but now if you really want the land,
It'll tell you
they'll
where.
give you the land for an extra hint. You guys can take as long as you wish without the hint.
Yeah.
Without the hint, it's hard.
But that's what makes it fun.
But they do not just do Disney parks, obviously. What other parks do you guys actually cover?
Universal and all that good stuff.
East Coast, West Coast, and they're
Yes.
continuing to expand even more after that.
Check them out, weareinthepark.com, if you need to get some game packs. They are so much fun.
We appreciate We're in the Park.
You know, they're awesome.
We love
Kevin and
that.
Amanda.
Get you some We're in the Park today.
Hell yeah.
Use promo code Walt's APT Podcast to save 10% at weareinthepark.com.
Definitely get you some getaway. Or, oh my goodness, I am all over the place with our sponsors
All
today.
over the
Definitely
place.
get you somewhere in the park. Get some game packs from their website, and look for the things that they have coming soon too. Yep, Amanda, if you're watching our video on YouTube right now, Amanda is being the Vanna White of the game packs currently. Where's your guys' next like in-person pop-up convention type thing?
The next one on our schedule is going to be Rogue City Comic Con in May.
I didn't know you guys were coming. That makes my heart so happy. Yay. Okay, I can't wait to see you guys. All right. Lou, you ready for the next question? You ready to roll out?
Okay.
So, no, it was me. So, can you share some of your best days and worst days in Imagineering?
You know, you did prime me with this question, and I thought worst. I really couldn't think of anything, and being laid off, I think, was that my worst day? But
Well, we were thinking like the most challenging day, though, right? Not so much
Yeah.
like bad day.
Well, and that wasn't necessarily a bad day. It was maybe a frustrating day, but I had a one-on-one with Marty Sklar that I had sent him an email with a couple of other people saying, thank you for these opportunities and working with you. I enjoyed it, et cetera, et cetera. And only 2 people responded to me, and one was Marty. And so he says, I want to talk to you before you leave. And it was all positive. The first thing out of his mouth is, I'm really sorry. This is the way it's got to be. They were downsizing and everything. So, and that happens after a big project. But he says, it doesn't have to be looked at as a negative thing. And you're going to go out and do other things, new challenges, new experiences. And he says, and if you come back, that just makes you a better Imagineer, So, anyways, just throwing that out. It's not necessarily a bad day. It was a frustrating day.
I've heard so many Imagineers say that Marty gave the best pep talks, and he took something that was like the worst situation and completely flipped it on its head and gave you optimism.
Yes. Yes.
So I love hearing you say that.
Well, and I told him, I said, I'm going to say some things to you. I was typing this letter, right? I said, I'm going to say some things to you that only because of this situation that I'm leaving, that I'm telling you this, because I don't want you to think I was buttering you up for any reason. But I said, you truly are a beacon to so many of us Imagineers. And it's true. I mean, I can't tell you how many downsizing and layoffs that I made it through. But I remember one time he came in and he said, he just gathered a group of us together and he says, listen, the rumors are true. We are going to be downsizing and we're going to be getting rid of some Imagineers here. He says, this is painful. We don't like doing this. But it's true. And, how many executives would actually do that? Come and tell you, hey, listen, I know about the rumors. I hear them. And unfortunately, they're true, and it was a preparation for people. So anyways, I thought Marty was pretty amazing. And actually, I'll tell you something else. I don't share this with too many people, but So when you leave at Disney in general, not just Imagineering, they do not write letters of recommendations. They just don't. It was just a rule. They didn't do that, right? And so anyways, when I went in to have this meeting with Marty as I'm leaving, he says, listen, Matt, and actually he said it twice, once in the beginning and one at the end. He says, if there's anything I can do for you, Matt, you let me know. So anyways, there was an outplacement group that came in, and so they're helping you put your portfolio together and everything, resume, and they wanted letter of recommendation. And I said, you're working with Disney and you know they don't give those out. So I thought, okay, I'll give this a chance. So I sent an email to Marty, and I sent an email to my manager. And I said, listen, here's the situation. They're asking for this. I know you guys don't do this normally, but what do I do? Anyways, my manager, I never heard from. I got a letter, glowing letter from Marty Sklar that I still have today.
I was going to ask if you still have it.
I do. It's put away, but it just a glowing letter, and they don't do that. So that was very touching to me that Marty spent the time, and he did it literally within like 2 days of when I sent this out.
Because he genuinely cared about you.
Well, yeah, I mean, and he did care about Imagineers.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's something that made him really special. So
yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
So, wait, did it help you get the job?
That actually this outplacement company didn't really do a lot for me. I ended up pounding.
The letter was the best part of it.
Yeah, but the letter was the best part of it. And actually you had Terry Hardin Jackson speaking there a moment, and we started the same day. We were hired the same day, and she actually went to junior high with my brother. They didn't know each other well, but they knew of each other. So there was kind of an interesting little crossings there. But Terry and I got together and submitted a sculpture for the city of Burbank. And actually, you know what? Tony Baxter was still working for the company, and he wrote a letter of recommendation. So I take that back. I've gotten 2. Yeah. Yeah.
You are the outlier twice.
Yeah.
So who wrote the better letter? Like, was it Marty or Tony? Like, which letter is your favorite?
I don't compare. That's like asking, and you guys ask, what is your favorite project and such? That's like asking a parent, who's your favorite child?
I can answer. I only have one child. No, I'm just teasing. I'm just teasing. Okay, Kevin, sorry.
So going back to the question though, like, do you have a best day, or I mean, is every day the best day? We don't know how the world works today.
Yeah. I can't. Well, you know what? I could tell you an interesting story about a very frustrating day. That was on, and then I'll end it with the best day. So, okay, I was working on the original Tower of Terror in Florida, and I was also doing Sunset Boulevard, and there was a lot going on. Actually doing 2 shifts at this one point for a couple of weeks. So I would do my morning 7 to 4 or whatever, and then I'd go home and sleep for a few hours, and then I'd come back for like 8 to 2 or whatever, right? And so anyways, there was a fellow, I was doing character facades at that time. So I was working on the outside and some of the inside of Tower of Terror and a lot of the exterior of Sunset. So as you come into Tower of Terror, there's a piece of stonework, architectural piece that you can go underneath. It's part of the bathrooms, I think, too, and an archway. And it comes from an area in Hollywood, actually. And so I had a guy that was retiring out of the union that was working with us on character facades. And he could be a little crusty. And anyways, it was his last day. And I got there. I didn't get there at 7 because I had worked the night shift. So I got there like at 9 or whatever it was. And my boss says to me, Matt, you better go take a look at that entry because someone's playing games with you right now. And I thought, oh, this is not what I need after a long night, first thing in the morning. So I go, and this guy was, so he was applying fake rock onto the wall, right? So it's supposed to look like river rock type of thing. And he was working from the top, and then he started working from the bottom. So he was going to come and meet in the middle. Well, how are you going? These are prefabricated stones. How are you going to make sure all of this stuff is going to fit and everything? And I, one of the few times I really was angry, I went up to him and I said, I cannot believe for your last day, you are going to make it a miserable day. And he goes, what are you talking about? And I said, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You're playing games with me for your last day. I said, you know what? Rip it off the wall and do it properly. And he had already started some of this, right? And he goes, what? And I said, rip it off the wall. I don't like it. And he goes, wait. What do you mean? What do you mean? And I said, you think you can make this thing work? I said, you want to continue on? And if I don't like it after you've spent the whole day, I'm going to make you stay late and rip it off the wall. I said, you want to play the game? Listen, I'm a team player, but I'm the boss here and I have to make sure this looks right. This is going to be up for 40, 50 years. You want to play games? Okay, fine. And so he was like, oh, okay, I'll make it work. I'll make it work. And so I actually stood and watched him put stones up for almost an hour in the sun. I was staring at him for almost an hour as he was putting this stuff up. And then I'd leave. I'd let him sweat for a little bit and I'd leave. And then I'd come back and I'd leave and I'd come back. And as he was putting up the last few stones, and I could see he was concentrating on this now. He was going to make this thing work. And when he was putting the last stones up, I walked up to him and I said, it's a lucky day for you for your last day. I said, I'm not going to make you rip this off the wall, but don't ever play games with me again. And I turned around and I walked away. That was a tough day. That was a tough day. And listen, and he was part of this group when we were inside Tower of Terror down in the boiler room and we're doing board form pressing and stuff. And that was kind of the start of everything, if I remember correctly. And I had some people I had never worked with before. So there was some new faces. And I said, listen, I said, I am the Imagineer. I'm the one that's going to have the last say here. I said, but we are working as a team and you guys might come up with something that's actually better than what we were starting to do. And I said, I want you guys to share that. I said, we're working as a team here. I'm going to be right in here working with you guys and we're working with a team. I have to approve the last thing because I have to make sure that the art director and my boss are happy too. So I said, we're going to have fun with this. We're going to work as a team. I said, and if you don't want to work as a team member and you don't want to have fun, pack up your bags and you can leave now. I said, this is going to be fun. I want this to be fun and I want to work as a team. And so people appreciated that, because, you get some of these guys that go, hey, I'm not paid to think. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. You get a paycheck. You got to be looking at this stuff and you're a professional. You can give me your professional opinion on something. It could be technical or whatever, but, I'm not above you guys in that sense. We're working as a team. So anyways, I always tried to make things fun and always tried to make people realize you're appreciated. We're a team. Let's get this thing done. I might have the last say, but let's all contribute. So anyways, I was very upset with this guy at the end. It's like, you really want to play this game?
Now we know. Don't cross Matt. You can have fun.
Fun is mandatory under Matt McKim. Fun is mandatory.
I'm a
also
pretty easygoing guy, but I take things seriously. Yeah.
Thinking is appreciated. Fun is mandatory.
Yes.
Yes. There you go.
And teamwork.
So what is your best day?
My best day. Okay, you ready for this? So actually one of my best projects was my first project, which was EDL, Disneyland Paris. And so I was doing model work, but I was specifically supposed to be doing rock work. So I transitioned into doing the full-size rock work, art directing the rock work in the field in Paris. So anyways, my boss says, listen, we're starting to work on Second Gate France now, and we hadn't even opened First Gate yet. And he says, Matt, I need you back in the model shop in Glendale. And I'm thinking, you're not going to let me, this is my first big project. You're not going to let me finish, you know? And I had, I think it was just a few months to go type of a thing. And actually he gave me a really nice compliment. He didn't throw out compliments very often either, but at my going away party on site, you know, and everyone's signing the card and giving you, you know, drinks and everything else and saying goodbye. And he turns to me and he says, you know, Matt, I think I've made a mistake. He says, I shouldn't be sending you home early. He says, you have been doing a great job here. I have you running around everywhere in Fantasyland. And he says, and I looked at him and I said, are you kidding me? I said, I packed my house. I'm ready to go. You can't change your mind now. And he goes, nope, it's done. But he says, maybe I made a mistake. So that was a nice compliment. Anyways, I mentioned that because I wasn't going to be there for opening. And I had given my, 5-7 years. What was it? Something like that. From 87 to 92. So that's 5 years. I had given 5 years of my life to this project. And it was like, I'm not going to see it open. So I took time off and I bought a ticket and I flew back to Paris. I stayed with some friends and I was there for opening day. And so after the festivities and everything, I walked down Main Street and I got on the train and I went through the diorama and I'm sitting with this French family. So it was a mother, a father, and 2 teenage kids, a boy and a girl. And so I'm watching their faces and everything as we're going through the diorama and I'm listening to their conversations and everything. And we come out of the tunnel. And if you've been to Paris and if you've taken the train, so when you come out of the panorama, the Grand Canyon, and you come out of the tunnel, it's Rivers of America with Big Thunder Mountain in the middle on the island and all the foliage and everything else. And I'm watching this French family and I kid you not, all their mouths were open, with their eyes so big. And I thought, this is why I do what I do. It was that moment. It was like justified everything that I had given to this park. So that was one of my best days, is to see this French family who knows if they had ever been to any of the Disney parks ever, California or Florida or Tokyo. And they were just blown away.
That's wonderful. You said you worked on rock work for Euro Design. Which rock work did you work on?
Well, in the model shop, I worked on the exterior of Pirates a bit. But most of my work was on Fantasyland. So I worked with Tom Morris a lot. So one of the things for the model I did was Pinocchio's restaurant. And that was kind of interesting too. So here's a great story for you. So Tom says, listen, I want you to get some research material for this. So this is Pinocchio, right? And he says, go to the studio and go down into the morgue and take a look at some of those background paintings that they did for Pinocchio. And I said, okay, I'll go do that. He says, you could take a Polaroid camera and you could take some shots of it or whatever. So my brother started at a high school at the studio. I started at a high school at Disneyland. And so my brother worked in the morgue, the art morgue, and he did framing and things like that too. And that was his start out of high school. And so anyways, I knew of Leroy and I knew of CC that were working down there, but I had never met them. So I go down there and here's this older gentleman, and he did almost the Tim Conway shuffle, old man shuffle. And he was like, "Oh, Sam McKim's son, Brian's brother." He says, "Oh, come on in, come on in." And Cece was all excited. Brian's little brother, you know. Anyways, so he says, "So you want to see backgrounds of Pinocchio?" So this is 1988, and ceilings are kind of low, water stains on the ceiling, shelves, you know, of all this artwork and everything. No white gloves. Leroy goes, "Okay, let's see here," and he pulls these things down, and he goes, "Here you go, Matt." And so I'm taking, you know, backgrounds of Pinocchio over to the table. He says, "Let me know when you're done, and we'll put them back up or whatever." And I, you know, took the pictures and everything, and I said, "Thank you guys," and you know, I left. But you know, it's interesting because again, yeah, it was pretty amazing to be seeing this old artwork and everything, but you still don't think about what you're handling, you know. And I was handling this stuff without gloves, you know. It's just kind of amazing. And now how things are, and you know, no water stains, temperature controlled, high security, cameras everywhere, you know, and how things have changed, you know.
That's
I mean,
wild.
So
Dave Smith was running the archives back then, right?
yes. But I
Yeah,
mean,
but
So he
it's
was,
not-
it was everything was so massive.
yeah.
And you know, where do you start? Where do you start with a company that's been around for, you know, since the 20s? So,
he
you
was still
know,
reining it in at that point.
I'm sure he was at that point. So here I'll back up a little bit and tell you a little bit about my dad and interesting little ties that went through his life. And so he was always drawing, always. And even as an actor, he would be on the sets, and in between shots, he'd be over in the corner drawing. And so he didn't want to be an actor necessarily. And he was fairly successful at it, and people liked him. You know, and he was known as One Take McKim. He would memorize his lines, and he'd hit them every time. He was in town. All these studios and everything knew him as One Take McKim. And so anyways, I'll wait to show you a couple of things dealing with film wise. I'll get back to that in a second. I'll keep with the Disney ties. So when he was 18, or getting ready to turn 18, it was suggested that he send in some drawings to the Walt Disney Studios, see if he could get a job, maybe in animation. So he gets the form letter back, you know, "Thank you very much. We suggest that you continue your schooling, but if you want to start at a younger age, we can put you in the traffic department, in the mail department, and whatever, and you could work your way up as you're going through school and such." Well, he ended up being drafted for World War II, volunteering for World War II, so he went off. Prior to this, though, as a child actor, my dad tried out for the voice of Pinocchio. And he obviously didn't get it, but his buddy, Dickie Jones, did. And so my dad, you know, I would have a Christmas party, and I'd have friends and family and neighbors and everything join. And so Dickie would always be invited. And I had a lot of voice characters, actually, interestingly enough. Kathy Beaumont would be there, and Margaret Carey and such. But anyways, my dad would introduce Dickie and saying to people, you know, if it'd be a neighbor or whatever, a family member, "This is Dickie Jones. He was the voice of Pinocchio." And he beat me out for it, type of thing, right? And Dickie would always say, yeah, Sam. He says, "I got like 9 months out of that job." He says, "You got 32 years out of it." He says, "You got the better deal, you know." Well, it wasn't until after my dad's death, I was introducing Dick to somebody and mentioned the Pinocchio, voice of Pinocchio. And Dick said, "You know, your dad was actually second in line." He says, "If I couldn't have done it for whatever reason," he says, "your dad would have been the voice of Pinocchio." And my dad had never mentioned that. And then something I always wondered was, did my dad ever talk to Walt? Were they ever walking through the studio someday? And my dad said, "You know, do you remember me as a little kid being here, tried out for the voice of Pinocchio?" Did he ever know that? He knew he was an actor and was successful in the Westerns and such. That's why Walt plugged him into doing a lot of design work for Frontierland. But did he know about Pinocchio? And then too, my dad did a Mickey Mouse Ingersoll watch ad, magazine ad for the Mickey Mouse watch as a child Western star. And I always wondered, did Walt know about that too? So here's a couple of things here. So this is a photo. Whoop, 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 whoop. Focus. Sorry, 1 second. This is tricky. I have to. It's autofocus, so I've got to figure out how to do this. I apologize. But this is the ad with my dad with the watch. Oh, come on.
You might have to just send it to us so we can put it up in our Discord.
There we go.
Social. All right, that works.
Can you see the
There
Mickey
it
Mouse
is.
watch?
Yep.
So that was the ad that he did. And then I found this photograph and I'm like, Brian, okay, this is my dad right here, right? This is Dickie Jones. This was for a movie. I don't know the name of it, but done back in the probably late 30s, something like that. Isn't that fun?
Yeah, that's amazing.
What a trip.
So they were friends. They knew each other. They knew each other well. But anyways, so talking about drawings, my dad was in a picture. My dad was in a movie called Little Men. And it had Anne Francis as the leading lady. And she was one of the big, sorry about that, the glare. There we go. This is Anne Francis. She was making more than Betty Davis. She was a big name. And this is my dad here. And so my dad, as I said, would do these sketches in between the shots. And so here's a chalkboard sketch that my dad did in between shots on that movie. And the director was Norman Z. McLeod. And his big boost to his career was actually doing the Marx Brothers. He did a couple of the big Marx Brothers, and that launched this guy. And so anyways, this is probably my great-grandfather that wrote on the back of this photo and says, Sammy McKim played the part of Tommy Bangs in Little Men at RKO, and in the schoolroom was a blackboard. During a brief recess, Sammy chalked the covered wagon on it as you see on the other side. When director Norman Z. McLeod saw it when coming back to the set to resume shooting, he said, let it stand and we'll reshoot the other scene we just took before Sam made the wagon. Thus, you will see that blackboard with that picture in the scene. So this director reshot the whole scene and redid it to have this picture in there. Well,
I love the documentation as well. Like, Grandpa was on it.
Yeah. Oh, he was their agent. He was on top of things. Well, I found this separately, and this was a sketch that McLeod did for my dad. Tommy Bangs, Little Men, 1940.
That's fun.
And I found other cards and things like that. Here was a Christmas card. They became friends, obviously. So this was a Christmas card that they sent to my dad and his family.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
So early on, 1935 was the first picture my dad did with Jane Withers. And also in 1935, he did a picture with Jimmy Cagney. And so my dad was sketching in between shots as usual. And Jimmy Cagney walks by and he says, what are you doing, Sammy? And he goes, oh, I'm just sketching. He says, maybe I'll be a cartoonist when I grow up. And Jimmy Cagney says, well, I was going to be a cartoonist at one point. So they sat down opposite each other and they sketched for each other and then signed them to each other. My dad talked about that forever. And just a few months ago, I found it. So this is what Jimmy Cagney did for my dad.
Wow.
That's so cool.
That's
What does
amazing.
it say in, what does
Yeah,
it
what
say
does
in
it
the
say?
corner there?
What's that?
Drawn for Sammy.
By Jimmy Cagney.
Jimmy Cagney.
And I guess my dad was going to have this piece of paper for something else. He scratched it out.
Oh, wow.
Didn't have another piece of
That's
paper handy.
amazing.
That's awesome.
Speaking of sketches, we do have our last sponsor break. Actually, the brilliant mind of Lou over there. So let's hear from Sunken City Designs.
Sunken City Designs brings you art. Do you like art? What about Disney characters like Mickey Mouse and the Oyster Thieves? You know, that's actually from Alice in Wonderland, the best princess movie ever made. Also, we have some dwarfs that have their heads ripped off sometimes. Why? I don't know. It's because it's Sunken City Design. So go there, sunkencitydesign.com. Get yourself some great merchandise. You got posters and, I believe, clothes. Who knows? I got a cup from there, and it's fantastic. Do you like cups? Do you ever use those? I do. Go for it. Oh yeah, sweatshirts. Can't forget about those. If you're ever cold, get yourself a sweatshirt from sunkencitydesign.com. Also, WALL-E. You know, that's the best movie ever made. Second only to Alice in Wonderland. All right, if you also like Walt's Apartment, they have merch for that too. Where? sunkencitydesign.com. Hopefully you've already loaded up that site and you're looking at it and you have some items in your cart. Go ahead and check out as soon as you can because the show's about to come back on. All right, everybody, we appreciate you.
Matt, I feel like I have to tell you that advertisement is filled with so many inside jokes from all of our shows.
Yeah.
But that's Lou's artwork. So
great. That's
definitely
fun.
check out Sunken City Designs.
I definitely will.
So if you're listening, definitely tell Lou we sent you. We appreciate Lou for sure.
Yes, we do.
Kevin, you had a question, right?
You have not really a question so much as a request. Matt, you've worked at several different Disney parks, and I was wondering what we can go to those parks today and see that are essentially your fingerprints in the parks. Like, what did you work on that's still standing today that people go, oh, hey, Matt McKim, that wouldn't be there today if it wasn't for him having some element of either doing it or designing it?
Yeah. Well, so we'll start at Disneyland, huh? So I worked on Toontown. I was doing rock work. Interesting thing is, Jolt Orme is amazing sculptor for rock work. And I found it kind of funny, you know, this was kind of early on, but we had just come back from Paris. But he says, Matt, he says, can you help me out? He says, I can do realistic rocks, but I'm having a problem with animated rocks. And so I started playing around with some of it, and we worked some things out, and that's what ended up being the rock work in Toontown.
So follow-up question to that before you go on. Did you do the hidden Mickey in the rock work for what was then Gouge's Go Coaster?
Are you talking about the hidden Mickey that is so hidden you can't see it?
And the one that's like obvious, like right when you walk in, like the first bend.
No. I actually, it's funny you mentioned that though, because I was up behind Goofy's bounce house. That's different now, isn't it? They've redone it?
It has changed, yeah.
Yeah. But behind Donald's and Goofy's, there's a retaining wall back there. And I don't think you can really see it from the train side. But anyways, we were back there and we were putting artificial rock on the back of it and everything. And it was a really slow day. And the guys say, hey, Matt, he says, it's really slow. Why don't you sculpt something on this wall. And I went, oh, okay. So I sculpted a Mickey head. And I actually had to come back a second day because of the nose, right? It was so dimensional. I had to wait and let this stuff dry, and then I could put the nose on it. So so it's semi-bas relief for the face, but his nose came out dimensionally, right? And I specifically made it so it would be buried beyond the dirt line, right? And I put the date, and I put MM, Matt McKim, but it could also be Mickey Mouse, right? So can't track me. So anyways, I did this, and so they were painting, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to go back and just kind of see how things are looking and everything. And I was expecting, my Mickey head to be gone. I took pictures of it, but the dirt line comes along, comes to the Mickey head, and it drops down and then comes back up again. And they left it exposed, and they painted it. They fully painted this Mickey head, right? And so the painters obviously had some fun, but you can't see it. And to be truthful with you, I would always tell myself, oh, I've got to get into the park early enough to walk back there to see if it's still there. Maybe the nose is missing or something, or maybe they buried it finally. But, and it's one of those things for safety reasons, because of the train and everything, I can't just walk back there during operating hours. And so it was one of those things I would just forget, being there, working all night for something or other, and I'd forget to walk over there to see if it was still there. So no, I didn't do that hidden Mickey, but I have done hidden Mickeys. And actually, I'll jump to Florida for a second. So on Blizzard Beach, we were doing one of the bridges. And so with the lazy river that goes around on the backside, if you're going around, the river runs clockwise. You'd have to ride it and look backwards, back at the bridge, right? And it's like a river stone, right? That's there, which I thought is perfect for putting a Mickey, right? So when it came to the keystone on this thing, on this bridge, I thought I'm going to put a Mickey head for the keystone. And so I found the head, found the ears, and then I thought, you know what? No one's ever done a hidden sorcerer's Mickey, which is appropriate for Imagineers. So I found a triangular rock, fake rock, and I put it up there. So there's actually a hidden Imagineers Mickey at Blizzard Beach, and it might be the only one. I don't know. But even in Tower of Terror, and you'd never see it, I put one on the back, and it was actually a profile. And I don't think you can see it. It's in the main shaft. So there's kind of a wall back there, and it's dark and everything. But I did put one there. Where have I also put hidden Mickeys? I don't remember exactly. Those are the ones that stand out to me. But kind of a neat thing that I did for Disneyland too. There was somebody that was taking a vacation and was in the middle of a project. So they sent me down to redo this rock work for canal boats. And it was some of it was the bridge that when you went underneath it, not Monstro, but the other bridge near the castle. That was all 2x4s and chicken wire and everything. And after so many years, it was just rotting. So we ripped it out, put in steel, and then redid it. And so I was looking at photographs to get everything just right, especially going up to the castle, all that linear rock work that was going up. And I kept thinking, all these original Imagineers were actually out here sculpting. Fred Jurger, Claude Coates, those guys were out there sculpting this stuff. And I thought, I have got, for my friends and my dad's colleagues, I've got to get this right and, do it as close as I possibly can to what the original was like. So that was kind of neat. When we redid the boathouse for Jungle Cruise, those guys we were using, the plasterers, were union. So you got to be careful with the union workers. You can't just pick up a trowel and start working. Some of those guys can get upset. Once you start a rapport with these guys, they're like, yeah, pick up a trowel, do what you want, Matt. But one day these guys were leaving, and you can't just leave wet cement. You got to finish it, right? So I actually finished off some of this cement work, architectural piece on the corner. As you're walking from Main Street and you come around, there's an architectural piece there. And actually we were trying to make it look like the Africans had made this and padded it in and everything else. So there's actually some of my handprints actually up there. So I literally did leave a handprint in Disney.
Literal fingerprints.
Yeah.
I meant figuratively, but good to know.
Yeah. And I worked on Indy. My initials are actually in, we were told to do that, put our initials in the queue line. And then for the expansion to, and this one has been talked up a lot, expansion for Fantasmic, that my boss had said near where you take the rafts across to the island, there's an archway that's been bricked in with a keystone. And my boss says, hey, I need this arch, and I need a keystone, and I need a date on that keystone. And then he walked away. And I'm like, okay. So I was thinking, what date do I put on this? And so I was thinking of the Columbia, which was the 1700s, right? And I thought, okay. So I put 1764. And one of the art directors was walking by. She was Disneyland based. And she says, so Matt, hey, this looks pretty good. Hey, this is great. What is 1764? What's the significance of that date? And I said, well, when this port was being built, and for this slough for the Columbia to be here, that was 1764. That was the date all of this was built. So that was the date that was put on the keystone. And we're walking kind of away from this at this point, towards like Pirates. And I could see her kind of like frowning as I'm telling her this story. And I said, okay. The truth is, John said, put a date on it, and it walked away. So I said, this is 200 years before my birth. So it's 1764. And she goes, okay, got it. That makes sense, Matt. And she walked away. So I kept it quiet. Oh, shoot. I kept it quiet for the longest time. And I wasn't going to tell anyone about it. So anyways, I kept it quiet, and people were saying, hey, this is popping up on the internet, and everyone's wondering what's 1764, and people are guessing on what this is all about and everything. Are you going to jump in? Are you going to answer this? And I said, no. I said, it's not important. And I think it's more fun to just keep it a secret and let people guess, and there were all these stories circulating and Lafayette and everything else. And I thought, wow, some of these people could be writers for Imagineering. That's pretty good. And so I don't know if I actually made it public at some point, but I ended up, and I had left Disney, and but I was doing a talk, and I was in Anaheim, one of the hotels, and Dave Smith, you mentioned Dave Smith. Dave Smith was there, and Dave came up to me after the talk, and he says, Matt McKim, he says, I can't tell you how many letters and phone calls I have gotten about that stupid 1764. And he says, and I didn't have an answer until just 3 weeks ago when I found out it was your birthday.
That is such
I love everything about the story.
Yeah.
I've also wondered, I mean, we've taken photos of that and
had
the same question of like, what is that year? There's
So
even
you
a post
didn't
on
know.
like the d23.com like website is shared in our like the private Discord we have with the other hosts here, of them like talking about how it's so mysterious and how so many things happened in that year that it could be about,
But now we've got the truth.
Here's the
Right.
truth.
I know, I
Here's
love
the
it.
truth. Yeah, it had nothing to do with, actually Eddie Sato did talk to me afterwards, much later, and I didn't realize that he was coming up with these backstories of Lafayette and the pirates and the whole thing, with Mansion and stuff. Maybe that we would do something like this. And I think there was actually a fictitious book. So there must have been some rumors out there about me and that archway or something, because, and I have to look, this has been so long now, But there was a story, and they looped in my dad and they looped in myself about this whole thing. Anyways, it was kind of interesting. But I like the whole mystery thing, it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun. You give so much of the backstory, but not everything. It's like a magician not giving all of his tricks away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For Florida, you
Absolutely.
worked on Blizzard Beach. Did you work on any of the other parks there?
I did. I spent a lot
Other
of
than
time in Florida. I'm sorry?
other than MGM Hollywood Studios.
Yeah, so
You
that
mentioned
was
that one.
one. I worked on Blizzard Beach. I actually worked on the other water park, the first one.
Typhoon Lagoon.
Typhoon Lagoon. Thank you. I just went blank. Raellen Lescaut, she was one of the ambassadors at Disneyland. I think early 80s, maybe 80, 79 or 80, something like that. And she ended up working at Imagineering. And she was working her way up, and I think she was show producer on that project. And she walked into my cubicle back in late 87, first part. It might have been the first part of 88. I hadn't been there that long. And so she says, "Matt, how do you feel about traveling?" And I said, "I'm fine with it. I'm single. I can do it." And she goes, "Great. I need you to go to Atlanta, Georgia for Typhoon Lagoon." And I said, "Atlanta, Georgia?" And she says, "That's where our engineers are for this project. And so we're going to be making changes to the model and everything, and I'd like you to be there." So she says, it's only going to be like 4 weeks tops. And I said, "Okay, that's fine." And they were literally sending me home every week. They'd fly me first class. Back then it was first class every week. I'd come home every weekend and had a nice hotel, big car, rental car, and everything else. I'm like, holy smokes. And I said, "You know what? Save some of this money. I don't mind staying here for a couple of weeks or whatever. I don't have to go back every weekend." But 4 weeks turned into 4 months. And so my Disneyland Paris project, I had to put on hold for a few months to do that. But anyway, so I worked on that, a little bit of model work, not a lot. I did some Epcot stuff. I was working show quality standards, so we were doing enhancement stuff. I did some flat work stuff that needed to be done, pouring textured concrete in some areas. I remember I was pinch hitting for somebody else. Magic Kingdom, I did coaster, Seven Dwarfs coaster, Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and the restaurant. I was doing character facades. Sorry, not for that. I was doing theme lighting for that. So it's the fancy lights, not the show lights in a show, but the chandeliers and sconces and things like that. What else did I do? I'm just trying to think now. Gosh.
We were honestly just talking in our group chat about wanting to have you on another time just to talk about your specific projects if you're ever willing to come back on, because
sure. Are you running out of time?
We are loving
Yeah.
this. We are loving
okay.
this.
I'm sorry. I brought a bunch of stuff out that I was going to share with you guys too, but we could do a part 2 if you want.
I mean, if it's up to you. We can keep going or we can do a part 2. We're here for it.
You tell me. I can show you a little bit of this stuff or whatever.
Well, I think we do a part 2, because then we can really dive into the pieces that you have and then explore more about your career and dive into the specifics of that and not be like rush for time or anything.
I want to hear the how, like your creative process. So I would love a part 2 because I wanted to hear your creative process, what goes into planning your specific pieces that you've worked on, all of those things. So I definitely, if you're willing to come back on, I would love that.
Sure.
Yeah. So what's next for you right now? What do you have in the works? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah. So in some respects, my life is on hold as I take care of my mom. her insurance would pay for her going into a home, but they would not pay for her to be taken care of at the house. So, and she's been living here for 64 years in this house. So my parents were the original owners of the house. And my dad actually turned, as they were building it, his little brother was the builder. So he had the garage, had a sink put in and different windows, a slider and everything else. And that became his studio. And then they just built a carport and then eventually made that an enclosed garage. So this has been an important part of my parents' life and my brothers and myself too. So anyways, we're keeping her happy here. And, you know, I was doing the podcast with Vince G. And we're going to see what happens with Facebook and where we go with that and everything. But my dad was being pushed to do a book and he never got around to it. So especially with us going through all of these boxes and finding all of these amazing treasures. And because my dad had such a colorful life, we've got to put a book together. So we're going to get everything organized. And I've actually, Vince was pushing me to, you know, really start writing and everything. I've written the first page, well, at least the first draft of what I think the first page will be. And so anyways, there's a lot of work to be done. And we've got to get better organized to be able to put this thing together. We did get a website that we're working on right now, which is Sam McKim DisneyLegend.com. And so some of the items that we were selling at the event, we will also be able to sell through this website. But this will also give people an idea of a brief history of my dad and showing some of the work that he's done. And then talking about possibly some events or what. So that will be our platform to communicate with people. So it's not completed yet, but we've got it, we've owned it, and we're building it.
I cannot wait to get updates about this book because I know you mentioned it during the centennial celebration for your father, and just seeing what you have found already. I know we alluded to it in the beginning, but just seeing what you have found already within these boxes, who knows what treasures you'll find in the boxes to come, and to be able to put all of that together in a book or even multiple books. We applaud you for writing that first page. I know that, you know, sometimes it's just getting the ball rolling. That's the hardest part. So we cannot wait to see what is in store for that. If you go to sammckimdisneylegend.com, you can subscribe for updates and get on the newsletter so you are the first to hear what is coming down the line with that. And we cannot wait for that. But until then, we're going to wrap up here and stay tuned for a part 2 because we have lots more to discuss and all kinds of fun things to see in the collection behind you. So until then, continue to place trust in the magic of imagination and remember the details within the parks surround us in our everyday lives. Imagine that. See you next time. Bye for now.
To all who come to this happy place, welcome. Disneyland is your land. Here age relives fond memories of the past. And here youth may savor the challenge and promise of the future. Disneyland is dedicated to the ideals, the dreams, and the hard facts that have created America, with the hope that it will be a source of joy and inspiration to all the world.